So we've been teaching yesterday about spiritual warfare, especially how it applies to our flesh. That yes, there is an enemy out there, and he does use people. He uses people close to us, but the way that he works through people is through their flesh. Remember, Peter was momentarily used by the enemy, and Jesus said, "It's because you savor the things of men more than the things of God. You want what you want more than you want what God wants." And I told you how I sorted out what spiritual warfare was. Is anything that the enemy did to try to hurt or hinder Jesus' ministry. The same thing applies to you because you're a disciple. I went through a 25-cent Bible and marked out everything in orange where showed what the enemy did to Jesus. And then I said, I took a blue marker and I marked out what Jesus did in response to warfare and what he taught his disciples to do. And that would be a good study for you to do on your own. It takes about an hour to do it. It's not exhaustive or exhausting. Maybe depends on how far you go with it. But it would be a good study for you to do. And I just thought I'd review a little bit of that with you here this morning. And so what I did in order to remember it, a way to put it away in my memory, is I took Matthew 5, 6, and 7 as major warfare teaching. And of course, not every verse in these 3 chapters has to do with warfare, but it's surprising how much is in there concerning warfare. And it was just a way to succinctly remind myself, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, that's what Jesus taught. He taught his disciples lots of things, and of course, he never taught them something unless he was doing it. And so Jesus came as this bubble of light in a sea of darkness, and he navigated this whole warfare thing by himself. He had no one to really talk it through with or work it through with. And so he not only survived, but he brought all us with him. You know, he didn't just get through by the skin of his teeth. He actually won the war in such terms that allows us to win the war. And he becomes the example of how to navigate this war that we're in. And so let's work at this. Matthew 5, why don't we go there? And there's lots in here, but I if you stop and again, the context is relationships. That's where most warfare happens. It happens between us and people. Someone once said, a guy named G.K. Chesterton, he said, notice how Jesus says, love your neighbors and love your enemies. He says, for so often they're the same person. In other words, the person who's closest to us is also our enemy, and that happens. Verse 21, he talks about you should not murder, you'd be in danger of judgment, but it's possible to actually become so angry with a brother that you also enter into judgment, and there's risks involved in how you relate to this brother, even though he may be acting like a fool, and you get so frustrated with him, you lash out and you speak against him. That's part of warfare, and Jesus is saying that's not our response. That's not how we're going to respond. Then in verse 38, he talks about the second mile. He says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. There are lots of places in the world today where they still practice eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. I just read a story not too long ago where a guy knocked out another guy's tooth. They had been in a fight. He hit the guy, broke a tooth, and so the law, this is in Islam, and the law said, okay, set up a court case, set up a place where you're allowed to knock out the other person's tooth. It's eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And it happens, it's part of how people resolve their conflicts. You did this to me, you're going to pay, I'm going to do the same thing to you. And so we know that's natural. We know that's what our flesh would actually want. And Jesus goes the other way, and he says, no, he says, that's what the law says, but we're going to go to something different, something higher. And he says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. What? That's counterintuitive. Someone does something evil to you, you're going to want to do something back to him. He says, don't do that. But whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue and take away your tunic, give him your cloak also. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. This is very, very different. This is spiritual warfare. Again, the whole point is your enemy has done something to you. Your natural response, your first response would be to do something bad back to him. So far, you're just being normal. That's a natural response. To not do bad back, to withhold bad, is half the battle. And most people, that's as far as they go. But to go the other way and be proactive and actually do something good or give or invite the person to hit you again, that's all spiritual warfare. That neutralizes the enemy from using that person anymore. And no one likes to talk about this. There's very few sermons about it, or it doesn't sound practical, and so we don't know what to do with this teaching. But I've done this in terms of people who have trashed me and lied about me and risen up against me. And when I ask Jesus what to do, these are the verses that he takes me to. And these are the verses that change the whole course of everything. So someone says, someone hits you, not physically, but it could be emotionally. He's using a physical illustration. Let's stay with that. Someone slaps you on one side of the face, and for you to turn around and offer the other side of the face doesn't make sense. No one in their right mind would do that. But what Jesus is teaching is that you have to put yourself in a place to be hurt again, because the biggest problem with being slapped is the fear of being hurt a second time, being slapped again. So the way to kind of meet that head on is actually to invite it. And it really blows the person's mind when you do that kind of thing. You actually put yourself in a position to be hurt again. And Jesus said, this is how you win the war. This is how you fight the battle. So I was in a church one time, and there were a group of people in the church who rose up against me, and they didn't want me to be the pastor anymore, and they lied. They did a bunch of things to try to get me removed. And it was all suggestion, no real issue, no real one thing you could point to said this is what he did. It was kind of like, well, he did something wrong. And so there's a point where I stopped being the pastor but stayed in the church. And so everything inside of me just wanted to stay home on Sunday. I didn't want to go back to church. And when I was asking Jesus how to recover, how to deal with this thing, he said, go back and actually go up to the very people who did this and greet them. I thought, I don't want to be hurt again. They've already hurt me. And I said, help me with this. Show me. And this is the verse he took me to. Turning the other cheek is putting yourself in a position to be hurt again. That means going out for coffee with the friend who betrayed you. You're putting yourself in a position to be hurt again. Nobody wants to do that. Well, I found out that the biggest bondage that was happening to me was I didn't want to be hurt again. I wanted to build walls. I wanted to build protection around me. I wanted to avoid the very people who did this thing. But to actually go to them and put myself in a place where they could hurt me again broke the fear that was the worst part of the whole problem. It was the dread of seeing them again, the dread of what they might think or what they might say. Once I went right up to them and said, how are you? And greeted them and stood there and put myself in a position to talk with them, it broke everything for me. And I could win the war. And the more I did it, the more freedom I gained, more confidence I gained, the quicker I recovered. All I had to do is what Jesus said. And I asked him, I said, he said, I want to teach you something more about turning the other cheek. And I thought I had known some things. I thought I had done some things concerning turning the other cheek. But he said, turning the other cheek is putting yourself in a position to be hurt again. Now, of course, there's abusive situations. There's husbands that beat their wives and beat their kids. There's a place where you bring in the law. There's a place that you leave. You don't keep doing that. There's something about that. This isn't talking about that kind of context. This is talking about relationship kinds of contexts. I think it's a different kind of warfare. There's a place to call the police, and there's a place to no longer let yourself be taken advantage of. Verse 40, I've seen people who are being sued, literally being sued, or having everything taken away from them in a divorce case or something like that. And we've coached them to actually go the other way, rather than trying to keep the last little bit of stuff from being taken, actually offer up the very things that the person's after. Just say, you can have it. I give it to you, take it. And it really has I've seen this have, some of the most powerful things I've seen in spiritual warfare have been people who've acted on these verses here. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Verse 42, give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow, do not turn away. The way I read this for many, many years is if someone asks to borrow a book, I must give it to him. I can't say no because he's asked to borrow it. I can't say no. That's not what Jesus is teaching here. Again, the context is warfare. The context is being treated badly. And so for the person who's treating you badly to ask to borrow something or ask to be given something, everything inside you would be to say, no, you're getting nothing. I'm not giving you anything. I don't want anything to do with you. You can't ask for anything. You have no standing in my sight. I don't want to even see you again. To go against those feelings so that you actually keep your own flesh in place, he's saying what you need to do is you actually need to give to those who don't deserve it, who are asking. So the context here is conflict. So we have a house in India, quite a large house there, and another pastor and myself, we had just arrived, had just spent the night, and all during that night I had this foreboding, just the sense that something bad was going to happen, that all of our plans to be there for that week were going to change, and that persecution was coming, and I had to surrender to that and navigate the whole thing in prayer. And the next morning when I woke up, some brothers, some of the leaders there, they came into my room and they're crying. And they said, Pastor Penn, we can't protect you. We just got word that someone's coming. They wanna burn the village. They're coming to do harm to us. I had heard a motorcycle come into the village early that morning, and this is a jungle village off the beaten path, and so it was unusual to hear that. And apparently this guy had come in. He had another guy on the back of the bike, and they come in and they started planning and talking about how they're going to attack the village. And some of our orphans heard them and came and told the leaders, and the leaders came and told me, and they said, we can't protect you. And so we had to leave. We had to pack everything back up and take off before they came to attack the village. Well, they didn't attack right that time because we had left, but they came back to attack a short time later. And the leader of our group, his name is Gabriel, and they came to Gabriel and they said, this day you will die. We will kill you. You will not live past this day. And this fight broke out. And our guys, they've been taught this, and they're taught not to fight. And there's a scuffle, and they're trying to get Gabriel. Gabriel says, I don't know what happened. He says, somehow I was knocked to the ground, and I was dragged into a house. And if they hadn't done that, whoever did that, he wasn't sure who did that. But if that hadn't happened, they would have killed him. And so he didn't die. Their vow was in vain. He didn't get killed. Sometime later, the guy who came in on the motorcycle and the guy who made the vow to kill Gabriel, he came to our house again This time he knocks at the door. Gabriel comes out, and he said, my daughter is really sick. And I know that the Americans always leave medicine here, and you have medicine, and my daughter's really sick. Would you give us the medicine? Now Gabriel, this guy's tried to kill Gabriel. Now this verse, we taught this verse over there. He says, to him who asks, and from him who wants to borrow, do not turn away. And so in a split second, Gabriel had to get past this flesh, which was his flesh. Natural response would be say, you and your daughter get nothing. I'm not giving you anything. You've been nothing but trouble to me. I don't care about your daughter. I don't care about you. We've got medicine, but you're not going to have it. That would have been a natural response. Except in a split second, Gabriel said, you can have the medicine. We've got medicine that will help her. You can have it. In fact, he said, we will come and pray for your daughter, and Jesus will heal her. And it blew the guy's mind, because he's expecting a fight. This is his enemy. And Gabriel got some medicines together, but also got some brothers. They went over, and they prayed for the little girl, and she was instantly healed. And I was just there this past March, and I was talking to Gabriel about that incident. I said, whatever happened to that man? Because I had heard, I must ask on another trip since then, I had heard that he had become a Christian, and that all his kids were serving the Lord, and I'm sure that's what Gabriel told me. So he said, yeah, he became a Christian. I said, where is he now? And he said, well, he's in heaven. He just passed away a few months ago. But he said all his kids serve the Lord. All his kids are walking, and they're serving in the church. But it happened because someone went against the grain of what you feel like doing, and you do something that's counterintuitive. You actually give to those who don't deserve it. It's powerful warfare. If you go up to verse 43, it says, you've heard it said that you're supposed to love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. And bless those who curse you. And there's something inside you say, yeah, I'll bless them. I'll bless them with a brick. I'll bless them really good. And Jesus is saying, no, I want you to actually bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. That is so hard to do. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the sons of your Father in heaven. And it goes on saying how he makes the sun to shine on the just and on the unjust. And it's possible to have no different love level than just the unbelievers of the world, where you just do what anyone could do without any grace. But to become like your Father, that is the highest goal. And so the goal is to do what he would do. And so this is warfare. This is all about responding to spiritual warfare. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. So I had this guy who was a friend of mine. I mean, we were close friends. He wasn't just part of our church. We were friends. I don't know how many evenings I passed in front of his wood stove just talking and being with him. He was someone that I really enjoyed being with. And he went through a difficult time, and he ended up coming up with this prophecy that God was going to kill me. And he was going to kill me because of some theology that I had. And he came and he actually prophesied it and said, the Lord's saying, you're going to die because of this belief that you have. And I shook my head and I said, that's not the Lord. The Lord's not that way. He's not confirming that. I mean, that's not the Lord. And he said, it's the Lord. It's the word of the Lord. So I said, why don't you come and bring that prophecy to our leadership team and let them judge between you and me. And he said, okay. So he came. All of our leadership team was there, and the guy brought this word from the Lord. This is years ago. This isn't at Wellspring. And the guy shared the prophecy, and they all said, none of that's the Lord. And he said, it is the Lord. Watch and see. It will happen. So it's a kind of curse. A curse is dooming someone to failure or dooming someone to harm. And so God's going to kill me because I have a belief about about authority, how authority should be used. And so he ended up leaving our church, and there's an old couple. I just led them to the Lord. They're a sweet old couple. And this guy would go to their house and tell them all these bad things about me so that they stopped coming to church. And that really broke my heart. It really bothered me that he would do that and that we would lose this old couple because they're at the very end of their life. They want to get baptized, and now they don't want to get baptized. And it was hard for me. And when I went to the Lord, I said, Lord, how do I deal with this? I just want to strangle the guy. How do I deal with it? And the Lord just started to help me to show me I need to love him. I need to bless him. I need to pray for him. I need to do good to him. Well, that's not what I felt like doing. But it's the only thing I had. And so every time the hurt came to my mind, every time what he did came to my mind, rather than stewing about it, rather than getting more angry about it, I would stop and I would say, Father, I bless him. I bless him. I pray for him. I pray for him and his family. And I could feel that it was working something in me, but it wasn't the cure, the instant cure that I really longed for. But I stayed with it. And then I learned that his wife was leaving him. And that really broke my heart. I loved her. I loved them. I knew that had to be hard on the kids. And so now I'm praying for his wife. I'm praying for his kids at a whole different level. I mean, I'm really going after this in prayer. And now I have feelings committed to it. I want to see this thing turn around. I want to see his marriage restored. And so for the longest time, every time I heard anything or heard anything about him or the memory of this thing came back up, I would just stop and I would bless him in prayer. I was invited to a big men's event, a big men's gathering. Thousands and thousands of men came together. And I'm there with a group of our men from church, and we're standing on the floor of this big arena, big conference center, and I feel this tap on my shoulder. And I turn around, and it's this guy, and it's the first time I've seen him in about 3 years. And the first thing that happened is my heart reached out and hugged him. And I loved him. I felt feelings of love. And my head is thinking, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is your enemy. This is the guy that hurt you. But my heart was already in it because my heart had changed through the practice of constantly blessing him, constantly praying for him. My heart had changed. So my heart actually loved the guy. And it completely surprised him. I don't think that was what he was expecting from me. But I was free. I was completely free. I could love him, and I called him by name, and I just so glad to see him. And so he called me a couple days later because he was thinking about that response. And he said, I just want to ask for forgiveness. Forgive me for cursing you. Forgive me for prophesying what I prophesied. Please forgive me for everything I've said bad about you. I'm asking that you forgive me. I was wrong. You were right. And I said, I've already forgiven you, but hear it with my mouth. This day, you are forgiven of everything you did. He said, is there anything you want me to do, anything you want me to make right? And I said, the only thing I could think of is I'd like you to go back to that couple that were starting to come to church, and I want you to tell them what you did. And he said, I'll do that. And he went right over, sat down with them, said what I did to Penn, what I said was wrong. And we were able to, just at the last part of their life, be with them again and bury them. And they died, and so we were able to do the funeral. And they're in heaven, praise God. But I won that war. That would have consumed me. That would have been like, it would just ate me alive. But the way to win it was to do what Jesus taught. And I've had to do this many, many times since. This is major spiritual warfare teaching. my middle son, Joshua, he came home from school one day, and when I came home from work, and we cuddled for a minute, and he was just a little kid, and he was crying, and he said, "Dad, I don't want to go to school anymore. I want to be homeschooled." And I knew he loved school, so this was a very different kind of thing. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he burst into tears. He said, There's a kid on the bus, and he's always after me, and he's always doing things to me. And every time I get in the bus, he just goes right after me. He sits behind me, and he swears in my ear, and he's always saying bad things and things he's going to do to me, and he's always doing this. Every time I get on the bus, he does this. I don't want to go to school anymore. Can I just be homeschooled? So I began to pray for him and talk with him, and I said, well, let's do what Jesus said. And I took him to this section of Scripture, and I said, let you and I pray for this boy. I said, I bet no one's praying for him. And so I prayed for him, and then I heard Josh. He began to pray for this kid who was abusing him and threatening him and saying all kinds of nasty things in his ears. And I said, and so Josh actually began to pray for him. And I said, let's just do this for him for this next little while to see if it doesn't make a difference, to see if it just doesn't help this boy. And I said, I got a feeling that he doesn't have a dad who loves him the way I love you, and he doesn't have anyone that can really help him. And so let's pray for him. And I taught Josh how to do good to those who despitefully use you, and those who hate you, how to do good for them, those who persecute you. So I taught him this section of Scripture and got him back on the bus again. And I said, if he does it again, just turn around to him and look him in the eye and say, what did I ever do to you that caused you to do this, treat me this way? So I wasn't saying just lay down and take it. I wanted him to stand up for himself, but I wanted him to do what Jesus taught. That was the tension. And so about a week goes by, and I'm praying for the kid. I'm praying for Josh to deal with this. And it's Josh's birthday. And so he has this birthday party, and a bunch of kids from school come over to the birthday party. So my wife, she calls me aside, and she says, see that big kid over there? And they're at the table, and they're enjoying cake and laughing and having presents and all that kind of stuff. And she says, see that big kid over there? And I said, yeah. I said, you know who he is? I said, no. He's the kid on the bus. I said, really? So when it was all over, I got Josh where we could sit and talk, and I said, tell me what happened. He said, well, I prayed for him. He says, I know that his dad doesn't love him the way you love me, and I know that something's bad is happening to him. So I started praying for him, and when I got on the bus, the kids started attacking me and started cursing me and swearing in my ear. So I turned around and I said, why are you doing this to me? What have I ever done to you that caused you? And the kid stopped. It stopped him in his tracks. And he began to open up. He says, you have such a nice house. And I know your parents, they love you and they care about you. And this kid came from a Christian home, a Mennonite home actually. But it wasn't happening. His parents weren't treating him right. His home was a mess. And Josh began, the kid began to open up about his home, and Josh got right in there and sat and listened to him. And then put the icing on the cake. Josh says, it's my birthday in a couple days. Would you come to my birthday party? And the kid was so surprised. He says, yes, I'll come to your birthday party. And my point in telling that story is that this works. That was the end of the war for that boy. It never happened anymore after that. The war was over. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what's happening. You can win spiritual warfare, not just by speaking to the devil or knowing the name of the demon that's involved. It's how you treat people. It disarms them. It causes the enemy not to be able to use them anymore. It's a powerful, powerful thing. Forgiveness. Chapter 6 deals mostly with forgiveness, forgiveness is one of the most powerful warfare tools you can ever employ. Actually releasing them from the bondage of the enemy, forgiving them and asking God to forgive them. I've had some amazing experiences where I've gone after this thing. I'm forgiving people who've done things to me, and then have them call me right out of the blue, very randomly, call me and ask for forgiveness for the things that I had been just really going after in prayer, forgiving them for. Chapter 7 is all about not being judgmental. Being judgmental actually accelerates the warfare. They say this about you, you say this about them. They conclude this about you, you conclude this about them. It's going to kill the relationship faster than anything. Nothing kills a relationship faster than you making up your mind about what they're really like. You determining what kind of people they are and what their future holds, and you judge them, casting a judgment against them. That will kill the relationship. It'll kill marriages. It's killed so many marriages. It's split churches. It's ruined long-standing relationships. Almost all the broken relationships that I can think of in my past, all kinds of broken relationships, almost all of it, I can trace it back to either I was judgmental of them or they were judgmental of me and I responded the wrong way. Almost all of it is because of being judgmental, and Jesus said, don't do it. But be discerning, and so he describes how to not be judgmental and how to be discerning. That's the big tension with warfare. So chapter 7 deals with that. And we have to do what Jesus did to become what Jesus became. And so you're going to have to practice warfare. Before this week is out, you're probably going to have to practice some warfare. How many went home to a little warfare last night after we talked about it? Anybody at all? No? Oh, well, it'll happen. Stay with it.